report out of the United States, a new investigation about the U.S. war in Afghanistan, saying officials have misled the American public about the true cost.
Turn the fuck on me! We're all in fucking ass!
It was the longest war in American history.
Had to fight for nearly every inch of ground taken in Fallujah.
Thousands of lives lost, and yet in just 11 days, the Taliban took back everything. How did the world's most powerful military fail to defeat a group of guerrilla fighters in sandals and AK-47s? Today, we uncover the shocking truth behind the US war in Afghanistan, the strategy, the lies, the betrayal, and the final collapse that stunned the world. This isn't just a war story, it's a wake-up call. It was a clear sunny morning on September 11, 2001, until everything changed. 4 hijacked planes, thousands of innocent lives lost, a nation shaken to its core. America was under attack, not by a country, but by a shadowy group hidden in the mountains of Afghanistan, Al-Assad. The pain was fresh, the rage was real. In the days that followed, President George W. Bush stood before the world and declared war, not just on terrorists, but on those who harbored them. The Taliban regime, which had given safe haven to Osama bin Laden, became the first target. Bombs fell, special forces landed, the world watched as the most powerful military force on earth began what was supposed to be a quick and decisive mission, and in the beginning it worked. The Taliban was pushed back, Al-Qaeda was scattered, there was hope, even celebration. America believed justice had been served, but what started as a mission to destroy a terrorist network slowly transformed into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. What began as a mission to capture Osama bin Laden started changing shape. The goal was clear in 2001: destroy Al-Qaeda, punish the Taliban, and prevent another 9/11. But within a few short years, that mission blurred, shifted, and slowly spiraled out of control. Instead of just targeting terrorists, the US now wanted to build a new Afghanistan, a democracy, a modern military, a government that looked and functioned like the West. On paper, it sounded noble, but on the ground, it was a completely different story. Afghanistan wasn't a blank slate. It was a deeply traditional, tribal society with centuries of history, honor codes, and power structures that no outside force could simply erase. Yet, the UN tried. Billions were spent building roads, schools, and ministries. Elections were held, politicians were appointed, an entire army was trained from scratch. But the heart of the problem was this: you can't build a nation with bricks and bullets if you don't win the trust of the people. And in village after village, the people still feared the Taliban or didn't believe in the corrupt new government the US supported. The mission had changed, but the ground reality had not. While American generals spoke of progress, the Taliban was quietly regrouping, waiting, watching, and planning for the day when the nation-building dream would collapse. When the first boots hit the Afghan soil in October 2001, America came in with unmatched firepower. Stealth bombers soared above the Hindu Kush mountains. Drones hunted shadows across deserts. Special forces teamed up with anti-Taliban fighters, pushing toward Kabul like a storm. In the early days, it looked like a swift victory. The Taliban regime fell within weeks. US soldiers entered villages once ruled by militants. Osama bin Laden vanished into the caves of Tora Bora, and that's when the real war began. Fighting the ghosts, welcome to the mountains. Afghanistan is no ordinary battlefield. It's a land of steep valleys, endless deserts, and narrow trails where even tanks can't go. The enemy wasn't wearing a uniform. There were no front lines, no flags, just shadows. The US Army had to adapt quickly. Small units of soldiers patrolled villages, walked into enemies they couldn't always see. The Taliban used roadside bombs, hit-and-run tactics, and then disappeared into the hills, or worse, across the border into Pakistan, where the US couldn't follow. American soldiers weren't just fighting Taliban fighters, they were fighting time, terrain, and trust. Winning hearts and minds, or trying to use as commanders, often said the goal was not just to kill the enemy, but to win the people. That meant building schools, handing out food, creating jobs. So one day, a US soldier might be fighting off a Taliban ambush, and the next, he'd be helping villagers fix a water pump. But in many areas, the Taliban still ruled the night. If villagers helped the Americans, they risked being killed after dark. The locals were caught in the middle, and many chose silence. The role of technology and air power, America relied heavily on its superior tech. Drones, night vision, guided missiles, satellites were called in. If troops were pinned down, airstrikes were called in. If a Taliban compound was spotted, it could be destroyed from miles away. Helicopters dropped troops into the most remote regions, often under fire, but sometimes the wrong target was hit. Sometimes civilians died, and every innocent life lost created more anger, more fighters, more war. The endless loop, year after year, the US Army rotated troops. Young men and women served 12-month tours, some returning for second, third, even fourth deployments. Each new unit arrived with fresh hope, each left with stories of frustration, sacrifice, and questions. Was progress being made? Were they winning? Or were they just holding the line for someone else to eventually abandon? The war in Afghanistan wasn't just fought in mountains and deserts, it was fought in the hearts of soldiers, in the silence of grieving families, and in the shadows of a nation that began to question, was it worth it? When the US military entered Afghanistan in 2001, the Taliban was pushed out of power within weeks. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new kind of war, one the Taliban had been preparing for their entire lives. Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires for a reason. The Soviets tried to conquer it, the British failed before them. The Taliban knew every cave, every valley, every trail. They didn't need maps, they had memory. While American troops depended on supply lines and technology, the Taliban fought with mobility, familiarity, and patience. They didn't need to win fast, they just needed to outlast. Taliban fighters didn't wear uniforms. One moment they were farmers in sandals, the next they were holding AK-47s and RPGs. They moved through civilian populations knowing the US had to be careful. If American troops fired at the wrong person, if a house was bombed mistakenly, the Taliban won something far more dangerous than territory: public sympathy. The war in Afghanistan cost the US over $2,300 billion, 0 cents, and lasted nearly 20 years. But the true cost wasn't just in money, it was in human lives and broken promises. More than 2,400 American soldiers died, over 20,000 were wounded, and thousands of veterans still suffer from PTSD and mental trauma. The Afghan people paid an even higher price, with tens of thousands of civilians and soldiers killed and the country left in ruins. After 2 decades, the US withdrew and the Taliban returned to power within days, raising painful questions about what was truly achieved. In the end, it became a war that cost too much, changed too little, and left behind a legacy of loss. The war in Afghanistan left deep scars, not just on the battlefield, but across the world. For the United States, it caused a generation of soldiers to return home with physical wounds and invisible trauma. For Afghan families, it brought years of fear, destruction, and displacement. Millions were forced to flee their homes, schools were destroyed, and entire communities lived under the constant threat of violence. Globally, the war reshaped US foreign policy, increased distrust in government decisions, and showed that even a superpower can lose when the mission is unclear. The impact wasn't just military, it was emotional, political, and deeply human. The war is over, but its impact still echoes through lives, memories, and history. If this video made you think, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.